Welcome to Voices in Hyperspace, where a group of friends get together and discuss the hit 90s cinema Babylon 5. Today we're going to go into Passing Through Gethsemane.
I'm Legendary Black Lion.
I'm Captain Melisilo.
And I'm Sunday.
So this is episode 4, and again, I don't really want to call it a filler because some story points do get touched on. But for the most part, the characters don't make a ton of movement. Which is, I guess, it's fine because they touched on a really thought-provoking topic here. The questions, there's several questions being brought up for this episode. I'm going to say this again. There are several questions that are brought up for this episode, and one of them is justice versus revenge. Like, how do we differentiate the difference between justice and seeking revenge? Where does the line between the two blur? I think they're a blurred line altogether. And this episode does a good job at foreshadowing some things too. Mel, do you have any thoughts? Just kind of overall review before we jump in, or how about you, Sunday? Do you have any thoughts before we jump in?
I didn't know it was me.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Mel.
Story-wise, I thought it was real. The foreshadowing was really well woven into the stories. We've seen some where they kind of just threw it in there because, hey, look what I did. And weaving it into the philosophies of the different characters, and Babylon 5 does always do a good job of showing the different perspectives. And they did it with one storyline this time instead of multiple. You had the different perspectives being shown for that one plot. The one plot was being shown, different perspectives were bringing into one plot, and about it maybe not necessarily being filler, it again asks a question that has been asked throughout this show. Like, what do you do about people who harm others?
Yeah. What about you, Sunday?
Yeah, I think it's a really good episode. It went real deep because we've got so many different religions on Babylon 5, and it's supposed to be like a democratic place, and we come into these situations like when is it Kosh revealed himself, and everybody now believes that the religion that they follow is the one because they all saw signs of their deity. And now it's like, well, the way that the humans are handling their criminals is being buttoned right up against to their religious beliefs and if what they're doing is effective or no.
Wow, that really is a good point because, yeah, you like we are slightly distracted by like all the war stuff going on, but yeah, they did have Kosh reveal himself, and all of the species have recollection of their deities. Granted it must be some sort of Vorlon, but there's like some religious and spiritual excitement on the station. So
I keep muting.
Oh, no problem. What were you saying?
That's what brought the monks there in the first place, because they heard of it and they came there to learn about the different species religions, which is at first kind of stood out to me. 200 years in the future, Catholic monks decided, or Christian monks decided, they needed to learn about other people's religions. Because that's been the complete contrast of what they've done for the last 1,000 years.
2,000. But Yeah, I was there straight up 1,000 years.
I kind of started from the Crusades, but yeah, because that's when the Roman Catholic Church didn't start till 1,000 years ago.
Yeah. I don't want to like delve too deep into that, but yeah, I think you're right.
Okay, that particular brand of Christianity, the original version of Christianity, they mind their own business.
Kind of. I mean, they had the Roman Empire to go.
No, I meant like
for the
the
most part.
Ethiopian
Yeah.
Christian Bible. They don't. We don't even hear about them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Ethiopian.
They think they're the first when more appropriated culture. Yeah. Well, the originals, yeah, they're not the problem. It's the appropriators that want to come torture everybody.
Yeah, the imperialists. So let's jump into this episode. There are a couple of things that come out straight up in the introduction, because we have of the order of the monks, it's Brother Theo playing chess with Captain Sheridan, which is interesting, but I guess it is a good thing to remind you that, like, hey, there's a bunch of monks on this station, apparently for a reason. And then there is Brother Edward, who's bantering with Ivanova, and they're both basically doing commentary on what's happening in that chess game. This is very Star Trek because they love their chess. Granted, it was 4D chess, on Star Trek, but we get to see some pastime on this station. Yeah. And speaking of foreshadowing, Ivanova says, hey, he's in trouble. Edward is like, he's seen more trouble. And Ivanova's like, you want to put some money on it? Hey, do y'all do that? Do y'all do that on some of y'all's poker games when you're only spectating?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Especially if someone is very well versed with another person's gameplay. They'd be like, oh shoot, they in a blender now. And it's like, nah, that's not bothering him at all.
Mm. And Edward's response was, gambling is a sin. I figured if you're gonna sin, you should do one of the really big ones. And I was just like, you would say that, wouldn't you? So a little bit of foreshadowing that happens later in the episode. Then we get basically Theo checkmates Sheridan. We shoot over to see that there's a Vorlon ship returning to dock in the station. It's like, when did that ship leave, and why would that happen? The person that greets the ship is Ivanova, and Kosh is like, I needed you down here so you could witness. And the question is like, witness what? And the person who dislodges from the ship, is that what it's called? Dislodge? Disembarks. The person that disembarks from the ship is Lita Alexander, our resident telepath. She put her hands on Kosh. Saved his life. And I thought this was interesting. Ivanova is the one to greet Lita, because remember, Lita's the one that outed Ivanova as a telepath. Ivanova was starting to have a kind of a romantic relationship with another telepath. Lita was kind of like the one that saved her life. So they do have kind of a complicated history between them. But Kosh is like, no, you need to witness this.
It's like, baby, come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we got another psychop or ex-psychop back on the station.
A rogue psychic.
Yeah, because Lita refused to become a psychop, and she was like, I don't want to do the rest of this. She's a straight up rebel. She was helping the Mars Resistance. Mm-hmm. My question, and maybe we'll answer this later, do you think that some of the Mars Resistance are part of the Rangers? Is that what we witnessed when is that what we witnessed earlier when that dude died in that sewer?
That could.
For sure.
Yeah. So we do get an explanation of what Lita was doing because when she left before before on the show, she had this really deep conversation with Kosh, and she was like, I want to see the Vorlon homeworld, and I also want to see your face. And he opened his encounter suit and he let her see. So she's back and she's explaining like, yeah, I've been to the Vorlon homeworld and it is really wild. Sorry. And we cut across and we see that our friend Edward is having a conversation with another woman. So do you remember what the monks are even doing on the station? They're doing like data entry basically.
Yeah, because they're really task or detail oriented.
Yeah. What were you going to say, Mel?
Their mission on the station was to learn about all the different religions from all the different worlds as much as they could.
Yeah, and the way that they contribute
this job in order to contribute and to pay for their lot. Can you hear me okay?
I can, but I was talking and I drowned out your voice, so can you say it again?
Yes. Yes, they are there to learn about all the different religions, but in order to pay their way, they are doing something that contributes to society and help pay for their lodging. And they do that by doing these like really detailed tasks such as data entry.
Data entry, data transfer, a lot of communications work. And they seem to be pretty good at it. And so Edward's talking to his client who seems like very excited, like, oh shoot, we're gonna get this done. And when they wrap up, there is a black rose by him. And he's like, well, where'd this come from? And she's like, it fell out of your sleeve. Don't you remember? He's like, no, I ain't never seen this before in my life. And he starts to have this sense of confusion. And I thought this was, again, pretty good with breadcrumbs here. This is all going to come together. Mr. Garibaldi. So he has a brief discussion with Delenn because on ISN, I guess this is his office. I don't know. And also, why is Delenn in his office? Like,
she was asking a favor.
Okay, yeah. All right, there we go.
Yeah.
She was asking him a favor. And on the ISN, Garibaldi's super excited because he was following this murder trial. And he gets the verdict. The verdict is death of personality. Or the sentence. He was waiting on the sentence, and the sentence is death of personality. And Delenn was like, what in the world is that? And Garibaldi explains, which this is what he's good for in the episode, in this episode, but in the show doing exposition. We see he has all this information that he don't really tell people until they ask him directly. Fine. Whatever, we'll go with it. Death of personality.
To know.
Say that again.
In this case, he was giving Delenn information that she literally wasn't privy to.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
It's annoying when people are privy to information and he's just like, oh yeah, I knew that.
I'm like, oh yeah, I knew that. And then why did you tell me? Well, I just had to see if I don't know. All right, so death of personality came about when they stopped using the death penalty. And so what the courts do is they sentence you to where the old personality is wiped out and then it is replaced with a new personality to serve the community. And then that person is transferred to a different place. This is interesting because we got to see what that looks like in two cases. One, we saw a person who got sentenced to death of personality. And then two, we got to see a personality being wiped out, which with Talia, which I thought was pretty interesting. Because remember when she got activated, she was telling, remember when she got activated, she told Ivanova that her old self was completely destroyed and gone. And I don't know about you, but that's kind of terrifying if you ask me.
Yeah, it's really sad because that old personality was such a benefit to the community. It was a sweet and caring and a kind person. And it was.
Okay.
She wasn't nice.
Talia?
Am I misremembering? No, the one that was almost like developing a lesbian relationship with Ivanova.
Oh yeah.
And then the psychor had used her and messed up her, like had placed a double personality, like overlapped it on top of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, like in this case, it was bad. In her case, it was bad because it was against her will, and there was no danger to society for her to be the way it was. Actually, yeah, because she was questioning the psychor who was helping. So that part was sad. And
Yeah.
when they take in criminals and do it, it's the question, like, are we
And
getting revenge?
And it was interesting to like meet the new personality, grow fond of him, and then find out he was a psychopath. Like, and now how do you feel about that? That like this person that you've not ever had a bad experience with, that you find out that in their past that they were this awful person. How do you feel about them now?
Yeah. I wanted to touch on Talia. So it was interesting because I felt like her old personality was a little aloof. She was in the psychor because it benefited her, but there was nothing that she did that was like, oh, the psychor is bad. It was more of like, I mean, yeah, they did stuff to me, but whatever, you know. But it was
a victim.
Say that again.
I really saw her as a victim because they kind of just the worst type of what do you call it, suppression is the one where the people don't know that they're being suppressed.
Yeah.
Or they think everything is fine, and she thinks everything is fine, and she's being suppressed, but she's okay with it because she's been brainwashed to think that.
Yeah.
And it looks normal because in our real world, it is normal.
Yeah. So we'll touch more on the whole Talia situation because we see a little bit of kind of similar situation in this episode. And that whole death personality sentence, it disturbs Delenn because she's like, why would y'all do that? And Garibaldi is all, I prefer the whole tooth for a tooth thing. You know, I'm a tooth for a tooth type of person. And Delenn has heard this before because she was like, oh, so we would leave everybody in your society toothless and blind. And Garibaldi's like, only the bad guys. And this got me because it's like, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That's that question about what's the line between revenge and justice. And there are some people in this world that think justice is revenge, or people think that revenge is justice. Like we need to get back at them. And remember, Garibaldi almost sees everybody as a bad guy in the first place.
And Garibaldi doesn't think past a certain point unless being nosy. Look, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You'll think real hard if you try to be nosy. But other than that, if it's just that's how society is, and go on about his business.
Yeah.
Which is being nosy.
Yeah. speaking of being nosy, let's do a quick little switch. So we get to see the whole thing with Lita. And I want to discuss her whole story arc before we get to the rest of this, because hers is pretty small, but it's interesting and it's going to come to play later. So we got her talking with Franklin. She's being checked out in Med Lab, and she explains her whole expedition into Vorlon space. Apparently, she ordered a ship. She ordered an Uber to take her all the way out there. The driver was like, "Oh, I don't know about being out here." She was like, "Fine, leave me in your escape pod, and you can go." So he left her with 5 days of food and water. And on the fifth day, when she was about to die, basically, a Vorlon ship came and got her. And she goes, "Next thing you know, I'm on the Vorlon homeworld." And everybody's like, "Well, okay, well, what'd you see?" And she's like, "I'm sorry. I'm just not allowed to talk about it." Oh, man. Talk about a tease.
That avoidance of, or the mysteriousness of the Vorlons gave them a great out for not using a Deus Ex Machina to confront the other psychic at the end.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Sunday, were you talking?
No, just trying to get my phone charged up. Sorry, y'all.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we hear about that, and then later on the episode, Lita becomes very important. But the part that I thought was great was when she was confronted by Londo, which
Yes.
Uncle Creepy Londo, quote unquote, bumps into Lita. He basically corners her, and he's all talking about how he heard about her being on the station. She's been there for a couple of days. All my contacts, they're not very good, but you know what? They were telling me that she was here and that she went to the Vorlon homeworld, and I need to know what she know. And Lita immediately was like, "I don't want anything to do with you at all, bro. Like, get out my face."
He killed the nice guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, for all of 2.2 seconds before he goes into trying to like buy her off. And when that didn't work, he goes straight to blackmail.
Yep.
Well, like when I say nice guy, I mean like the Reddit thing, r/nice guy, where they where hit on you, and then when the women reject them, they turn into complete and total toxic jerks. Like they start threatening them, threatening their own lives, all this other stuff. It's like, "Oh, you're beautiful, blah blah blah." They're like, "Oh, I got a boyfriend." They're like, "Well, you ugly slut and B," and all this other stuff. Like just 360.
Very much just like that. Yeah.
Yep, that's what he did. r/nice. Because he's insecure, just like now.
And then he threatens her with the Psychor. And she's like, "It's a good thing I'm not with Psychor anymore, because if anyone came after me, I would make whoever sent them after me have nothing but nightmares." And, she just like takes off. And Londo, he makes a joke. He's like, "My whole life is a nightmare, so it probably wouldn't even work." It's like, no, Londo. There are horrors in this galaxy you have yet to witness. Lita is one of them.
His nightmares would be so bad he couldn't pick up his bottle.
Right.
Like, getting drunk is how he stops the nightmares, basically. He wouldn't be able to do that. So
right. Because whatever the techno mages did to him would have been considered a mercy. Anyway, so we know that Lita has been enhanced. Oh yeah, that's what it is. When she was being examined, yeah, when she was being examined by Franklin, she was healed. Like certain issues with her blood, congenital diseases and stuff like that, all that stuff was fixed. And Franklin is like, "How'd you do it?" And she's like, "Can't tell you, bro. Sorry."
Because she don't know. The Vorlon just take care of their people.
Well,
Yep.
they did with Jack the Ripper.
Right. Well, believe it or not, there is a little foreshadowing with Lita about the Vorlons we see in the last scene of the episode. We will come back to that in a minute because we just need to get back to the main story, because this is when we're starting to see some things that are starting to haunt our main character here. And it also, we also start to ask some other important questions. So Edward is having a meeting with Delenn. They're talking about spiritual beliefs, and it was very interesting because she's talking about how the Minbari have a particular perspective on the soul, and Edward is like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, the soul is a non-localized phenomenon. We don't believe in gods or anything like that, but this is what we think about the soul. And I thought that was really interesting. So the Minbari, their religious class, they're a non-theistic religious society. So they don't have like gods or things that they worship, but they look at the universe as a thing to be revered and honored. And then she talks about how the universe, like we are part of the universe and we are the universe trying to understand itself. I thought that was really interesting. With the soul being an unlocalized phenomenon, this is where they use the analogy of the source of light on the wall, and how when you reflect light on the wall lights up, but the wall is not the source of light. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. What are your thoughts, Mel?
I thought it was very similar to the way my spirituality, where everything in the universe is connected and you are connected to it because we're all the same thing. It was very similar to that. And I am eclectic as well. Like the captain said in the beginning when he was playing chess.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not a localized thought process. It's very open to accepting everything that exists. And I find that really relatable when it comes to justice or revenge. Is it that something else did something to me or something related to me? Or is it the universe flowing as it is? Because some things are volatile in the universe. And it is okay to move away from those things that are going to be volatile so that things don't blow up. But at the same time, it's like to expect all things to constantly be in harmony means no change, because nothing would be destroyed. Nothing is created without destruction.
Interesting. Really interesting. What about you, Sunday? Any thoughts about how the Minbari view the universe?
I really like how Mel just put that. I don't know that I had connected that when I listened to their conversation during the show. But I'm very much in belief, like when I am speaking of social justice and the restorative processes, that I try to live my life in a way that is going to reflect positively because of how I believe that I'm connected to everyone and all the things. And so it's not okay for me to, well, this is my life, so I can live it however I want and damage and destroy myself because I'm connected to everybody and everything. So me damaging me damages everybody else too. So yeah, that's great. I love it.
Yeah.
I thought about hierarchy in that, like if you did want to present things in an archy and see where you are in an archy from that spiritual perspective, everyone is on top because we're all connected to the equal to the internet, to the not the internet, the so it's equal that part.
Maybe it's like the internet. Maybe we have universal sci-fi, Wi-Fi. Ooh, maybe we have universal Wi-Fi. So Delenn asks Edward, like, what is his defining moment of his belief? And Edward answers with the interesting story of the Garden of Gethsemane, and he wonders if he could be so brave. What he's talking about is the night before Jesus is arrested. He is praying to God, like, take this cup away from me. In other words, there are going to be a lot of bad things happening to me, and I kind of prefer that they wouldn't. and he knows that. He knows the truth. He's like, the cup won't pass from me, and he willfully faces the trial, the rejection, and the crucifixion. And Edward is like, I don't know if I could be that brave. Like, that's wild to know that you're going to be tortured to death and then to do it. And the idea is because there's a greater good, then it gave Jesus the courage. Not going to jump into theology there, but I think that, do you think that kind of fulfills the analogy what Edward is talking about there?
Yeah, that's what he's talking about.
Yeah,
I see that. For some reason, that made me think of the Jack the Ripper episode. It's like, it's in contrast because Vorlons did the complete opposite. Instead of making him like this guy has completely lost his memory, and his physical body and not his mind is fixing things in the universe instead of breaking things. Whereas the Vorlons took Jack and said, you're going to do the craziness that you do, but you're going to do it on the side of good.
Right.
Or for our side, whether or not they're good or not, but they're fighting the shadow. So I'm assuming good. Oh, yeah. But it becomes his torture because he remembers everything.
Mm-hmm.
Is he actually atoning, or is completely forgetting everything and being white atoning? It's kind of like an opt out of just killing them.
And it really is an assumption that the Vorlons are on the side of right, because we only have the written perspective of where they're coming from. I don't remember having the ability to converse with the shadows to know why they're doing what they're doing. Like, the very existence of all these different species could be in some way damaging a part of the universe that the shadows can see that we can't. Right?
Yeah.
I
wanted to point out real quick what Edward points out is Jesus had a choice. He could have walked away, but he didn't. And let's highlight that because that's the foreshadowing. It was important that he had a choice. It was not against his will. It was his will to stay. There we go.
Okay. Yeah.
And then as they're wrapping up, this is where we learn a little bit more about Minbari, because Edward's saying, like, I want to learn more about the Minbari and about Valen, and this is where Lanier starts to info dump, and Lanier's like, oh yeah, so we honor Valen, and Valen is the Minbari not born of Minbari. He started the Grey Council, and he helped us develop the sect. And then Delenn's like, hey, we'll deal with that later. Come on, stop. And
he said, shut up, nerd.
Like, don't be telling all our secrets. We're not out and out, especially to this random dude.
Like, for me, it felt like when you have a hyperfixation and you find an outlet to start talking about it, and everyone's like, shut up, why are you talking about that?
Oh man. So as they wrap that up, Delenn promises, I'll tell you all about it later. Edward takes off, and I don't know why he's going through Brown Sector. Maybe the monks are staying down there because they're poor.
Right, yeah.
And as he's getting off the elevator, he bumps hard into a Centauri. And the dude's with his accent, "Oh, I am sorry. Sorry." He bounces into Nice Bull as a Centauri. And as he passes, no, I'm sorry. I am on the wrong spot. Hold on, let me pause this real quick. Okay. So what we missed before was Edward went to his quarters and he found the blood message on the wall that says "Death walks among you." He reached out to Garibaldi. Garibaldi is kind of skeptical about it, but he is not, he's not giving Edward a hard time. He's like, "We'll look into it." This time, Edward he bumps into the Centauri going through Brown sector, and as he passes him, this is when he starts to hear screams and he's experiencing hallucinations. And I thought this was wild. This was a really cool way that they did it, because he's in Brown sector and it suddenly starts to become like a different place because he's treading through water. And he comes upon a dead woman and he turns over and he sees her and he hears the voices are calling him Charlie and they're calling him a murderer. I thought they did that part very well.
Yeah.
Edward was very disturbed, but he didn't seem too surprised.
Because it felt like a memory.
Yeah. And so he basically returns to his quarters, and this is what we find out. Like, was he there for like 2 days or something like that? Is that what Theo said? I feel like Theo said that he was there for 2 days, or he missed something for the day.
Oh, I don't remember that part.
He had missed prayer that morning, but I'm not sure how long it was.
So whatever. I can hear you, or I can hear me. Thank you. So whatever the amount of time was, he stayed in his quarters, and he's sitting there thinking, which, like, he's disturbed, but there's something else. Like, he's curious too. And when Theo finds him, he's asking him, like, "Well, what are you like? What's going on?" Edward's talking about his experiences and how he's worried because he's remembering things that he's never done, and he's wondering if he's going crazy. Theo tells him, like, "Oh, well, just leave it alone."
I think that's just like the religious kind of. I don't know that all the systems are like that, but when there's a problem, especially a mental health kind of issue, they're just like, just pray about it. Don't worry about it. Don't like actually seek help and get a resolution to your mental health issues.
Yeah, it did feel like that. He's like, let God handle it, which that him saying that gave me rage, because it's like, what does that even mean?
I'm so used to hearing people say stuff like that it just rolled off my brain. But yeah, I had that conversation with someone once, and I'm like, because I think I was arguing that therapy is good for people and that if they need help with things, and they were arguing that, well, not arguing, but their rebuttal was that the Bible is good for that. And I'm like, there are no like direct instructions. Like, you can take the stories in the Bible and use them. You can correlate them with things in mental health and mental health and just mental health. But you can't, there's no like direct route other than just trust me. Just trust God. And trusting in a thing is not going to help you look at your situation and change it and adjust it. It is possible for people to do it. They have done it. But I think those people really actually use techniques from mental health in correlation with it. You can do it in correlation. I believe that I've seen it. But if you're just like, I got the Bible, I got Jesus, everything gonna be okay. Well, everything is burning around you.
Ooh. Yeah, because what it makes me think about is a lot of times people on the fundamentalists, they use religion as a they use their religion as like a confidence multiplier, right? Like your ego is being soothed, therefore you don't have to worry. You're overconfident about something you really don't know about, but because we're all confident about it, um, we can, you can rest your lack of knowledge on the fact that all of us are confident in this lack of knowledge. And so something vacuous is let God handle it or let God worry about it makes a lot of sense to some people. Because you feel like you don't have to go through a thing by yourself. But without the actual community support behind it, such as therapy, such as, spaces to talk and process out your emotions, you really just are leaving people alone with their mind, with their racing mind.
Yeah,
And that's rough, because then like you don't feel safe to ask for help again, which is what he's doing to Edward.
exactly.
um
And like I feel like to add to that, in some circumstances, when it comes to things that help with mental health, the church do very well, and they're somewhat temporary things. Or if the issue isn't that bad, you're just anxious about something that's going to go away. Let's say, for example, you're anxious about the election. You go to
yeah.
church and you sing and you let all that out and you feel better.
Ooh,
Like
yeah.
really, it was something that needed to pass. You sing, you dance, you get all those emotions out, and everyone is in a community where you understand that what's going to happen is going to happen, and we can move on now because you got all that out. That is therapeutic. That is awesome. Yeah, if you having personal problems with the individual, you're living with someone who's like being abusive or something, just letting God handle it isn't going to get you out of that situation. Going to church for a day only gets you out of that situation for a day if that person ain't going to church with you.
Hmm. Hmm. Good point. And it sounds like what you're talking about is kind of like a form of co-regulation that happens within communities. Like, leave all of your troubles at the altar. You got the emotional music. You got people depending on where you are, because there are some places that don't let people yell and dance, but some people do, and that can
Yeah.
be therapeutic too. Yeah, but yeah. So Theo is trying to get Edward to like not worry about it, and Edward is like sitting there just like blank eyed, and he says, "I'm gonna be here by myself," and Theo takes off. Theo immediately goes to Sheridan. He's like, "Look, Sheridan, Edward is telling me about these different experiences that we're worried about. I may have not ever really cared about people's past, but he's saying some pretty dark stuff." And Sheridan seems to immediately catch on of what he's saying, like, "Oh no, not Edward." He's like, "Yeah." Um, and Edward is going to be looking to trying to figure out his past. So we need to figure out his past before Edward does, because his life might be in danger. I like how they put that reason on there, because he could potentially become a danger either to his community or himself if he learns who he was.
And what a failure by that gentleman from leaving his disciple, I guess you would call him, alone in that moment.
Yeah.
Why not the two of us go together to Sheridan to try to help you solve your problem? Let you know that I hear you. I believe that you're having a really challenging time, and we're going to use our resources to try to help resolve it, instead of telling him to just don't worry about it, when this is clearly a whole issue. And now you're in the later part of the episode trying to reach out to him and help him and stuff, when you should have never left somebody who was suicidal or potentially harmful to the community alone in that mental state in the first place.
He literally said he was a danger and then left him. Like,
Yeah, he's a danger. Let me leave him in Brown sector where there's a bunch of people here being dangerous too. And also like Theo's worries are kind of off too. Well, they're off, but they're like he's too late because as soon as Theo left that room, Edward does a Google search and he and he's asking the computer to look up he's cross-referencing the things that he saw, the Black Rose, the murder, the Orion system, the blood on the walls, all of that stuff. And the computer's like, it's going to take 4 hours for us to figure this out. And this is how J. Michael Straczynski and nobody could really properly predict Google.
Yeah.
Because that takes seconds now these days.
And also, it took, I think the Star Trek computers were more accurate to how Google and Siri are now.
Yeah, kind of like instantaneous results.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they just sort through stuff. Like even data is faster than that.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, maybe that's, they wanted to be different than Star Trek. It's like, hey, this may take a little time, the resources and all this. And nope, turns out a cell phone could do it way faster.
They still read the news on paper. So
yeah. Y'all got to fix that in the new.
It took forever for Ivanova to figure out who Jack the Ripper was too. That took a long while. Mm-hmm. I think the only thing in Star Trek that really be taking a long time is when it's an alien or a foreign technology and they're having to decode a language and figure out that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So while that's going on, what we learn is Garibaldi responds. He's like, "Hey, Garibaldi is talking to Edward. And he's like, hey, we haven't found a trace of blood on the wall." And Edward's like, sure, whatever. What do I expect? How can you find a guilty conscience show up in a lab report? And Garibaldi is completely ignoring this. He's like, hey, we'll keep an eye out for that bag you lost. And Edward's Edward is in a very pensive state. He's just very frustrated. So, and so when the search comes back, he finds out that the report leads back to a person, which he saw his old self as Charles Dexter, who was sentenced to death of personality. Was it some 8 years ago? And he was transferred from the Orion system. And then Garibaldi catches up and he talks to Sheridan and Theo about that.
And that he was a bad person then because he had facial hair.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He had the Mirrorverse goatee. Yeah. Short hair, goatee, bad guy. And what Garibaldi shares is Charles was sentenced to death of personality. When he was transferred, there was a fire and he was assumed dead. Okay, that sounds pretty close. And he's and then there in between that gap, that's how he joined Theo's order. And Theo's like, well, again, we never asked about it, but this is a personality serving the community. Of course, they would join a religious order. That makes sense. And I'm like, okay, there we go. This is how the story works. Theo immediately finds he tries to find Edward and he's trying to convince him hey, look, your past doesn't matter. All that stuff, that's not who you are. Who you are, you care about the community. You've done so many things. And Edward, he gives some really good rebuttals. He's like, how can I confess my sins if I don't even know what they are? Mm-hmm. And this is where we start asking some questions, but this is really interesting though. The new personality is feeling guilty and is feeling remorseful over what the old personality did, to the point that the new personality is trying to find a way to atone again. And I'm like, this is actually some pretty good writing. So
I really appreciated Theo's response that even if you don't remember, God does. And that is very comforting in to like note that, like, even if you didn't have your mind wiped or anything tragic happened to your mind, something as out of your control as a disease that causes amnesia or dementia or Alzheimer's is a real concern for people who are leaning on salvation. And to think that, like, well, what if I forget? Then am I still going to be okay in the afterlife? That was a comforting thing for him to say.
And Edward does, he points out, like, I have this, my soul is the soul of a killer. He points out, my soul is the soul of a killer. Who knows what other crimes I committed when I don't even know about them? And this is where we're getting the feeling like Edward is either going to kill himself or or run away or something. Like, this is feeling pretty stressful.
Gonna go find an airlock.
Right. And this is where Theo tells Edward to leave it in God's hands. And they, he's like, no. But it's also telling how Theo is wanting to accept Edward no matter what, even though he didn't know what Edward was. Edward was a murderer in his past life. When we switch over, we find that Garibaldi has gathered all this evidence. And the evidence suggests that someone is making Edward remember his past. Garibaldi found the lost bag. It had like the comm from the interview. Garibaldi found the bag. It had the comm from the interview that Edward had with Delenn, and he kept it on. So he heard the voices. It turns out that the voices that Edward heard came from the PA system. There was fake blood that would disappear that was on the wall. And they were like, well, how could he have these hallucinations? And that's where they're speculating there must have been a telepath at work. And they said that the only person that could be the telepath is that Centauri that he bumped into. And then they were like, okay, so why would somebody go through all this trouble? They're like, aha, revenge. So, like, again, Sheridan doing his thing, putting it all together. I mean, yeah, Garibaldi and Ivanov were there. But it was Sheridan. And
when you ran, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
When you ran through that, I was just thinking, like, they did test the wall for blood. They didn't find anything else. They didn't question the substance that was on the wall. They just said, "Oh, it's not blood."
I bet it's a Garibaldi thing. It's like, did you find blood? No, it's not. We didn't find blood on the wall, but you want to know what else we found? I'm like, nope, I don't want to know.
You told me to find blood. There's some other stuff where it won't blood, so I'm just answering the question because I got a pasta to go cook.
Right. So then we switch over to Edward sitting down at a desk, and it turns out the family members and loved ones who are so Edward is sitting at a desk, and in walks a bunch of people. Those people are the family, the offspring, and the friends of his victims from his past life, and they're seeking revenge. And we hear from the main one, like, hey, we set this up because we needed you to remember who you were before we kill you, pretty much. And so now we have our race against the clock. So now we have our race against the clock. Sheridan and Garibaldi have to figure out, like, where is Edward? They interrogate the telepath, and I thought this was pretty funny because it's a Centauri. We saw a Centauri telepath on the station, and it's a male. Do y'all remember the other Centauri's telepaths?
We saw those 3 girls that followed the emperor.
Yep.
and we're raised to be. But this one is male, so he gets to be a freelancer.
Yep. And just like all the other Centauri, he is a douche nozzle. And he threatens, he's like, look, y'all got psychor. Y'all got rules to follow. And Sheridan's like, it's a good thing we got a telepath that's not part of psychor. They black bag him, which this disturbs me because I've seen people get black bag in real life before. And they bring in Lita, and she like rips the location of where Edward is, where they are going to be torturing him, and they go to find him. When they run in on Edward, he is tied up in a crucifixion style where he's been tortured and essentially beaten within an inch of his life. And I mean, it makes sense for Sheridan and Garibaldi to be there, but also Theo is there.
Because he cares now.
Yes, right? And Theo gives him a moment, gives him that touching moment, that death. And this is where Edward, he admits like, okay, I think I understand now. You know how I said I didn't know if I could be like Jesus? Well, I understand now. It makes a whole lot of sense because Edward is remorseful for his past crimes, even though like his personality doesn't remember it at all. He's remorseful because those people were in pain, and only one of them had the courage to like beat him near to death. And Edward didn't want to run. He didn't run away. He didn't want to run away. He wanted to take his comeuppance. And
what Jesus would do.
Right. WWJD.
What would Jesus do? Stay here and get my ass kicked. Yeah, pretty much. Like, is that? That's a whole nother thought process. It's a whole nother conversation to have. Is one of the concepts of that particular religion to make you more subservient to whatever punishment people want to give you.
Yes.
And when I say it out loud, yeah.
Yeah, because who's to say that the person who's delving out that punishment is worthy to give it?
Yep.
Whoever was murdered by Charles, like, who says you were a great husband? You could have been whooping on your wife and not been a good guy yourself. So, yeah, no.
That's a good point because the guy who did it was like, hey, these others, they lost their nerve. They don't have enough strength to do what needs to be done, but I do. I don't know about you, but he seemed to know what he was doing when he tortured him. He seemed pretty eager to do so.
And Christian's favorite thing to do is throw the Bible at you to rebuttal. So I'm a rebuttal too. He without sin cast the first stone. So we need to put you through trial to see if you've done anything before you get to beat up anybody. But no one is without sin. So.
Mm-hmm. And also remember, Charles is dead. They killed that personality.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Edward is going through is Edward's own choice. And yes, there's the little bit of persecution complex from his Christianity, from his Catholicism. He, like, as much as we're sad that he's beat up and stuff, but it's like the state had already carried out a sentence, something that he didn't have to do. But he's like, I have to suffer for my view of justice. I did wrong. Even though I don't know what I did it, and I need to be punished. And it is kind of an ego thing because, again, I guess it goes with what Sunday said, like, who's to say that this person, the person who is issuing out the punishment, is even worthy to do so? And we can say that about the state too. Like, who says that the state is worthy to do it?
Yo, don't get me started on that shit right there, because they are not, unequivocally. And it is a huge problem that I have with, especially like corporations getting away with anything, or like the government like accusing anybody and sentencing them for anything. Hello, look at what you are just in the act of existing, how many atrocities you're causing, and you want to, point your finger at anybody. Look at the 4 fingers pointed back at you. Or is it 3? However many fingers are pointing at yourself. When you're pointing the finger at somebody else, you are not innocent. You're the biggest bad guy, but the only one out here not taking accountability or paying for the wrongdoing that you're doing constantly every day. We can tie just about, all of the issues with society right back to government involvement, and y'all not taking atonement for none of that shit. So who the hell are you to tell me or to judge me or to sentence me or give me a tax for any fucking thing?
Right. And
somewhat fun fact.
Go ahead.
It's not fun at all, actually. The executioners back in the medieval times, they were prisoners that were supposed to be put to death. But since they were already sinners that needed to be put to death, they were given the option of being the one to kill, since they already were sinners. Which is complete contrast to what the religion was at this time.
Oh man, Catholics didn't have a problem torturing and killing people back in the day, but they did have a problem thinking that it was wrong. Like, because back then it was like, how dare you question the church,
Right.
Anyway, so we're wrapping up the episode. This is where Edward dies, reflecting on his courage at the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's dying in the comforting presence of Theo as he says a prayer for his soul. And that dude is dead and he is gone. And it like the whole thing just kind of makes you think about some of the ethical implications, because we watched this play out. The whole memory manipulation is like, what are the ethical considerations of erasing someone's memory, giving them a new personality? Does the person deserve to be judged for their past actions if they no longer remember them? During your live, Mel, this is where we were asking the questions: what makes a person? What makes a human? And we were talking about memories as far as like other sci-fi properties, like Blade Runner. What is it? Bicentennial Man, iRobot, AI, things like that, where they're like, we want to be more human. And so they have these memories and they are like actuating themselves. But it's like, are you a human? Are you robot? Do you understand what it means to be alive? Can you remain a human if we're going to just like manipulate your personality and memories and take that stuff away from you?
Right. And actually, I saw something after our live that stated that what human is, by definition, is of Earth.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
no, I think during the live I said that, but I was thinking more the experience of what it means to be a human, because you mentioned how Data in Star Trek is on his journey, which is so weird to me, but
it's Pinocchio.
Yeah, he is. And then here's the other ethical question. We talked about the state, but this universe, the Babylon 5 universe, where humans are like, okay, we're not going to kill your body, but we're going to kill your personality. Murder's murder. Killing is killing. Dying is dying.
Mm-hmm.
So what is a person? Is a person their memories? Is a person their personality? Is a person their body?
Right. And that was the Ghost in the Shell question.
Yeah. Well, in this episode, Delenn brings something up too. She's like, we don't think that the soul is localized. We think that it's something else. Mm-hmm. And our bodies just hold the soul. So then, if that is true, and let's just make the assumption, then what was happening to the person when their memories are destroyed and a new personality is put in? Like, what is happening to the soul, if that's even a thing?
Right.
You know,
Well, the
those
soul should still be there technically, because um, from a spiritual perspective, many spiritualities consider the person to be the body, the mind, and the spirit. So he would still have his spirit and his body if you take away the mind.
And heaven forbid that a capitalist society let a body go. I mean, we need that to serve and to produce, right?
you notice how you notice how he's poor. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. But I wanted to make sure to bring up those questions because it's so good. The other question is the role of faith. Like, how does faith influence one's actions and decisions? Because Edward he was all about serving people, and then he got into the order as a way to do so. And so, more than anything, his faith was about serving people. It wasn't about it wasn't about himself, as much as we can tell. Like, now there's some, like I said, there's some persecution complex stuff in there, but we won't jump on that right now. It's gonna come up later. Um, and so he was serving his sentence. Like, I guess another question is, how can a person who has their memory destroyed willfully serve this sentence? If a person's personality is gone, does that change their will as well?
It depends on how much of the memories affect the soul. Because if you just have the body left, and they say they're wiping the memory, they didn't say they were putting new program in. They could be, but
because if he's being sentenced, he didn't willfully undergo the sentence. Like, they were like, we're just going to destroy you. And I get, and I know I'm kind of pushing it here because the state is like, we got to get this murderer out of our society. We got to do something. And is like, okay, cool. We got to get him out of the society, but let's re-implant him as a person that we want. And so he's a more docile and more subservient person. And he's serving that sentence willfully now.
Yeah.
And it's clearly not an effective tool that they're using, because just a couple of phrases and a flower can cause him to remember these things.
It was those things plus like the telepaths. Like, they really had to dig in, because remember the Centauri was like,
yeah,
we had to after we figured out how to do it with human minds, it was easy. It was like, dang, man, all right.
And then on top of that, if they're able to do that, if a person is a rebel, right? Like, if you're just going against the status quo, could they not frame you for awful acts and then wipe your memory and make you a more compliant citizen of an order that you feel is oppressive?
Of course.
Yep. I mean, you're asking a very serious question that's going to come into play, I believe, in season 4. Maybe season 5.
I think we do that now without telepaths. We use psychology and marketing and subliminal messaging. And I still want to stay here and question, how do you get grown adults to drink bleach? And that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So what? Oh, sorry. What were you guys?
Just the thought of people following something blindly, despite what they know, what logic they do have, to follow it blindly is the same as to have your autonomy taken. Whatsoever you don't know that your autonomy is taken.
That's kind of how I feel about a lot of people in these elections too. Like, I'm not going to get too much into it, but people think that they have a choice. That they don't have a choice. They have a lack of options, and then they have to fight. They try to fight and defend those lack of options. Yeah. All right. So without us going too far down that trail, we're gonna wrap up the episode where Ivanova and Lita are having a discussion about the events at the dock, because apparently Lita left and ran some errands for Kosh. She did some Instacart for Kosh. She came back. And this is where we find out that Edward's murderer is facing justice too, and he is sentenced to death of personality because he committed murder, and he is initiated into Theo's order as well. Theo is pondering like the lines between revenge and justice. This is where Sheridan is asking the question, like, where does revenge end and justice begin? And Theo was like, "Oh yeah, let me introduce you to our new brother Marcus," and it's the dude that killed Edward with his bare hands. and Edward's like, and Theo's like, "You should welcome him. You know, he's going to do all these great things." And Sheridan looks pissed off. He looks so mad.
He goes to shake his hand, and he pulls his hand,
like, "You nasty piece of shit."
Yep. Makes it really difficult because usually they're removing that person, from the people that they harmed. But you can't really know, like in all of the universe or even on our little planet, like the planet is smaller than it seems. And you can't ensure that they won't run into somebody again, and there's no restorative practices being done in this system that really helps the harmed persons overcome the hurt that was done to them.
Yeah. And like I mentioned a lot in season 1, like, y'all need therapists. Y'all don't have therapists in the future.
See, the Enterprise did. They had oral counselor.
She was a main character.
Yeah. I don't know if she was terribly helpful, but but she was there.
I mean, I think like the concept of a psychic being the counselor, like a counselor is supposed to try to help you work through your emotions. So it's kind of a shortcut to like, hey, this is your emotion. Because like with my therapy, the first year was basically me trying to identify my emotions and then talking about them. And then after that, it's going through what my emotions were. That was such a big hurdle to go through when it comes to trauma and mental health. And she has the ultimate shortcut.
Yeah. So to end the episode, this is what I thought was pretty funny. Well, funny but interesting, right? So we see, I guess, in the alien sector, Kosh has his helmet off, and basically his Kosh has the helmet of his encounter suit off, and there are beams of light shooting into the eyes and mouth of Lita Alexander. They either going into her or coming out of her. I don't know. And then she also has gills because she's been modified so she can like live down there, which means there's like some things have changed for her to be on the Vorlon homeworld.
I think they did that so that he could do that. I mean, my theory is that because he's entering through her mouth and nose and mouth and nose, that she needed gills to go through that process because she can't breathe. Because he's blocking airway. Because he does technically have a physical presence, because then he wouldn't have been able to touch and hold Sheldon.
He wouldn't have been able to be poisoned either. So
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
he's physically entering.
Yeah. So So we got a few memories. We have a few mysteries awaiting for us. But really, what it is that Lita has a pretty interesting conversation. Lita has a pretty interesting relationship with Kosh, and this is something that we will see begin to develop more as the rest of the season and series goes. So yeah, so that's our episode. I thought that we had some pretty interesting conversations and questions here, even though it was technically a filler because we didn't talk about the war. We didn't talk about any of the refugees. We didn't talk about the shadows. We only talked about the Vorlons, and we saw a Centauri. We saw 2 Centauri. But that's about it.
I feel like the concept of this episode is going to push another episode and reflect on it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It absolutely will.
This is the universe that's going to reflect itself onto another episode.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, let's get ourselves out of here. Thank y'all for joining us with Voices in Hyperspace. You can catch us on our Facebook and our Instagram and our TikTok at Voices in Hyperspace. Be sure to keep the conversation going. To do so, throw some messages and some comments down on our YouTube channel. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe there. You want to catch up with me? I'm Legendary Black Lion. You can find me on Instagram.
I'm Captain Mill Asylum, and you can find me at millsrebellion.com.
And this is Sunday. You can find me at a poker table.
All right. Well, with that, we'll see you out there. Bye.
Love y'all.
Love you too.